At midnight, Tokyo slept. By dawn, nearly 100,000 were gone. Most of them were women, children, and the elderly. Entire families vanished before they ever had the chance to open their eyes. This was Operation Meetinghouse, the night American bombers turned Tokyo into an inferno. It remains the single deadliest air raid in human history, claiming more lives in just a few hours than even Hiroshima or Nagasaki. But behind that number is a quieter, rarely told story. Children who never woke, mothers who shielded babies in futons, fathers who tried to carry one child and lost the other. What many don't realize is this Tokyo was not destroyed by one bomb, but by tens of thousands of tiny ones, each filled with napalm, raining down on a city made almost entirely of wood and paper. The destruction was not random, it was planned, and it was known, even before the mission began, that Tokyo would burn unlike any city before. The US called it strategy. For those in Tokyo, it was a night of survival that never came. Tonight, we'll uncover what happened inside those burning homes, the memories families carried, the choices mothers were forced to make. And we'll ask the question that lingers even now: was it ever necessary to let the children die in their sleep? Tokyo in 1945 was not a fortress of stone or steel. It was a city of wood, bamboo, and paper. Most homes were traditional Japanese houses, shoji screens, tatami mats, thin wooden frames. Streets were narrow, crowded, and dry. The city's lifeblood ran through wooden bridges and clustered neighborhoods where one fire could leap house to house in minutes. American planners knew this. Long before the attack, surveys and test fires were conducted on mock-ups of Japanese homes in the deserts of Utah. Engineers reported the truth plainly: if firebombs were dropped on Tokyo, the city would ignite like kindling. One U.S. officer admitted later, "We knew Tokyo would burn. We built it to prove it." For the families inside those paper-thin walls, none of this was known. To them, war was something happening on distant islands, Okinawa, Iwo Jima. Their capital still stood, despite scattered raids. At night, families huddled in makeshift shelters, believing that their walls, their clay roofs, and their faith would protect them. But those defenses were illusions. Clay shelters became ovens when heated by fire, wooden rafters turned into torches, and narrow alleys became funnels of wind, feeding flames with oxygen until the city itself breathed fire. Tokyo was not just a city waiting for peace. It was, unknowingly, a tinderbox waiting for a spark. And on the night of March 10th, 1945, that spark arrived carried by hundreds of American bombers. They never woke up. At just past midnight, the first wave of American B-29 bombers reached the outskirts of Tokyo. Their payloads were not single massive bombs, but clusters of small canisters filled with jellied gasoline, napalm, and magnesium. Each canister opened in mid-air, scattering hundreds of smaller bomblets that burst into fire upon hitting rooftops. For the families beneath, there was almost no warning. The air raid sirens blared, but they had sounded before. Some children stirred, half asleep, clinging to futons as their mothers hushed them back down. Others never moved at all, too young to understand, too tired to resist sleep. The first fires erupted across the eastern wards of the city. Within minutes, whole blocks glowed red. Flames shot through paper walls, smoke filled the narrow rooms. Parents tried to scoop their children into their arms, but many never had the chance. One survivor remembered waking to her mother's voice, screaming her name, pulling at her arm. Her younger sister didn't respond. The futon she slept under was already smoking. By the time they dragged her out, it was too late. In many neighborhoods, families did not flee at all. They trusted the shelters dug beside their homes, small underground chambers lined with clay or bricks. Mothers wrapped their children in futons, carried them into the ground, and sealed the hatch. They believed this was safety, but napalm did not just burn, it sucked the oxygen from the air. In those sealed shelters, many suffocated before the fire ever touched them. Entire families were found later, huddled together, their children clutched tightly in their arms. For those outside, the sound of crying children mixed with the roar of fire. Parents shouted names into the smoke, tripping over debris, searching for little hands in the dark. What many don't realize is this: most of the children who died in Tokyo that night never saw the flames. They were lost in their sleep or in suffocating shelters before morning ever came. But outside those fragile walls, the true nightmare was only beginning. The flames created their own wind. Once the napalm clusters ignited, Tokyo ceased to behave like an ordinary city fire. Thousands of small blazes merged into a single inferno, so vast that it generated hurricane-strength winds. The firestorm devoured oxygen, pulling air into its center with such force that people were literally sucked off their feet and dragged toward the flames. Survivors described the sound as a monstrous roar, like the sky itself was burning. Roof tiles cracked, wooden beams exploded, and smoke swirled so thick it turned night into something darker than night. One mother recalled clutching her infant while stumbling through the smoke. The firestorm's winds yanked the child's blanket from her arms, sparks showering over her hair. She managed to crawl into a shallow ditch, but her baby no longer cried. The smoke had taken him before the fire ever did. Others tried to flee down alleys, but those alleys became tunnels of fire. The air itself seemed alive, carrying embers faster than people could run. Entire streets ignited at once. In some wards, the wind was so fierce that people were thrown into canals. Survivors said it was like an invisible hand dragging them, tearing families apart in an instant. American pilots circling above reported the firestorm could be seen from miles away, a giant whirlpool of flame twisting upward into the sky. What they could not see were the thousands trapped inside, children crying for water, parents suffocating as the air vanished around them. One Japanese doctor later wrote, "It was not fire that killed so many. It was air. The fire stole it from their lungs before they had the chance to scream." For those still alive, there was only one hope: the rivers. The rivers became both refuge and grave. As the firestorm spread, whole neighborhoods broke into stampedes. Parents carried children on their backs, grandparents clung to walking sticks, neighbors shouted directions through the smoke. The only hope was water, the canals, the Sumida River, and the ponds that cut through Tokyo's districts. Mothers wrapped futons around infants to shield them from sparks, stumbling barefoot over burning streets. Fathers carried one child in their arms, dragging another by the hand. But the fire was faster. Embers leapt from roof to roof, and winds pushed families forward, like cattle driven into a funnel. Survivors recalled the bridges as scenes of horror, crowds jammed so tightly that people were crushed before even reaching the water. Some tried to leap from the bridges directly into the canals below, but many struck stones or landed on those already in the water. Those who reached the rivers found no salvation. The flames followed them. Napalm spread across the surface, burning as it floated. People dove under, only to rise into a sheet of fire. Others clung to riverbanks, gasping for air as heat seared their lungs. One teenage survivor remembered her mother's final words, "Hold on to me, don't let go." But when she surfaced, her mother was gone. The current had pulled her under, and the river had claimed her. Another man, just a boy then, recalled the river boiling around him. He said, "We thought water would save us. Instead, it cooked us alive." By dawn, the canals were filled with the bodies of families who had fled together and perished together. For many, the water was not escape, it was the final trap. And yet, for some, an even crueler fate awaited, the impossible choice of who to save when there was no time left. Some carried one child, Others left one behind. In the chaos of the firestorm, survival became a matter of seconds. Parents faced choices no human being should ever face: who to carry, who to save, and who to leave behind. Mothers with 3 or 4 children could not lift them all. Futons were heavy, and the smoke was blinding. Many strapped the youngest to their backs while shouting for the older ones to run. Some children obeyed. Others froze in terror, refusing to move. One mother later told of placing her eldest son at the door of their burning house, begging him to run. He hesitated. She had the baby in her arms and another child pulling at her sleeve. She turned away for only a moment, and when she looked back, he was gone. The boy had vanished in the smoke. She never found him. Another survivor recalled watching her neighbor, a father of 5, desperately trying to pull his children through the alleys. 2 stumbled, and he had to choose whether to stop or continue. He pushed forward with the 3 who could run. The others were lost to the fire. He lived the rest of his life with the memory of looking back and seeing his children's silhouettes swallowed by flame. These moments were not isolated. They repeated across the city, countless parents carrying one child while listening to another's screams fade behind them. And for those who survived, the guilt never faded. Many lived into old age with the same memory haunting them, the face of the child they couldn't save. When morning came, Tokyo was not a city anymore, only ash and silence. But inside that silence, the cries of the night still lingered. Silence where an entire city once breathed. When dawn broke on March 10, 1945, Tokyo was unrecognizable. Miles of neighborhoods were reduced to flat ash. What had been tightly packed blocks of homes and shops was now a blackened plain, broken only by the skeletal frames of a few chimneys and temple gates. The air was still thick with smoke, heavy with the smell of charred wood and of something worse. Survivors stumbled through the ruins barefoot, their clothes in tatters, their faces grey with ash. Some wandered in shock, calling names into the emptiness, their voices breaking when no answer came. Children wandered too. Orphans overnight, they clutched burnt toys or pieces of roof tile or nothing at all. A young girl was seen walking in circles, holding the hand of her younger brother. Only when a neighbor approached did they realize the boy was already gone. Doctors and rescue workers could hardly comprehend the scale. Canals and rivers were clogged with the fallen, their numbers so vast that survivors had to step carefully between bodies to reach the banks. One Japanese doctor wrote, "It was not war, it was the slaughter of the sleeping." In some places, the silence was broken only by the sound of sobbing. Families searched for anything that remained: a sandal, a piece of clothing, even a bone. For many, there was nothing. Entire households had vanished without a trace, burned so completely that not a single object remained. The U.S. Command later recorded the raid as a success. Over 16 square miles of Tokyo destroyed, tens of thousands killed, industries crippled. But for those standing among the ruins, there was no word for what they saw, only silence, grief, and questions that no answer could satisfy. And yet, across the Pacific, the same night was reported differently. For American commanders, it was not tragedy, it was strategy. The U.S. called it strategy. Survivors called it hell. For the men who planned the raid, Operation Meetinghouse was the culmination of months of frustration. High-altitude bombing had proven inaccurate, and Japan's war machine showed no signs of collapsing. General Curtis LeMay ordered a change. Fly lower, strip the B-29 seconds of guns to carry more bombs, and target the heart of Tokyo. The decision was calculated, deliberate, and cold. LeMay later admitted, "Killing Japanese didn't bother me very much at that time. I suppose if I had lost the war, I would have been tried as a war criminal." In America, headlines praised the success. Military reports noted the destruction of factories, small workshops, and the crippling of Japan's ability to continue the war. Yet behind those words lay an open secret. The majority of those killed were not workers in factories. They were mothers, children, and the elderly. Some U.S. officers questioned the morality of the strategy. Did destroying a city of civilians hasten victory, or was it simply terror dressed as policy? For survivors in Tokyo, the answer was never in doubt. A Japanese teacher later wrote in her diary, "They did not fight soldiers, they killed sleeping families." And yet, the raids continued. Tokyo would burn again in the following months, along with Osaka, Kobe, Nagoya, dozens of cities reduced to rubble and ash. For America, it was the path to victory. For Japan, it was survival that never came, but even in the ashes, something unexpected endured. From the ashes, Japan rebuilt. By the end of the war, more than 60 Japanese cities had been bombed, but none suffered more in a single night than Tokyo on March 10, 1945. Entire districts were erased. Tens of thousands of families left no trace. Yet within a generation, Tokyo rose again not as a city of paper, but of steel, glass, and resilience. Survivors carried their memories quietly. Many never spoke of the night to their children, fearing the pain would return too vividly. Others recorded diaries, interviews, and testimonies not of politics or strategy, but of moments. A futon pulled over a child, a voice calling in the smoke, a last embrace in the river. For the U.S., the raid was remembered as part of the relentless push to end the war. For those who endured it, it was something else entirely, not strategy, not even history. But the night their families never woke. One survivor, then a little girl, said in her old age, "We rebuilt the city, but not the people. They are gone forever. That is what the fire took. The lesson remains. When war turns its fire on the innocent, the cost is carried not by soldiers or governments, but by children asleep in their beds." The U.S. called it victory. For Tokyo, it was a memory carved into silence, and from that silence came a vow: never again should fire fall on sleeping children.